What if I told you that we know the exact year the first Europeans made it to the Americas, and that year is 1021? That's right, almost 500 years before Christopher Columbus set sail, a small group of Norse explorers were living, working, and building on the shores of modern-day Canada. For centuries, their story was dismissed as a myth, a fanciful tale from the Icelandic Sagas about a distant land of wild grapes and endless timber they called Vinland. But this was no myth. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're uncovering the real story of the Vikings in North America. A tale of incredible seafaring, violent first contact, and a discovery that changed nothing until it was rediscovered 1,000 years later. To understand how a Viking ship ended up in Canada, we have to look west from their Scandinavian homeland. The Viking Age, from the late 8th to the mid-11th century, was an era of explosive expansion. Fueled by land shortages at home and a thirst for wealth and glory, Norsemen pushed out in all directions. While some went east into Russia or south to England, the Norwegians, facing the open Atlantic, went west. This was all made possible by their technological marvel, the Viking ship. They had the sleek, fast longship for war, but the true hero of Atlantic exploration was the Knar. The Knar was a wider, sturdier cargo ship built to haul people, livestock, and goods across the violent ocean swells. Its overlapping planks, held together with iron rivets, created a hull that was both strong and flexible, bending with the waves instead of shattering. Armed with these incredible ships and a sophisticated knowledge of navigation using the sun, stars, and even the flight patterns of birds, the Norse began a stepping-stone journey across the ocean. First, around the year 874, they settled Iceland, a volcanic island where they established a unique commonwealth free from the rule of kings. A century later, around 982, came the next step. A fiery-tempered man named Eric the Red, exiled from Iceland for manslaughter, sailed west to explore rumors of another land. He found a vast, icy island with sheltered fjords and green summer pastures. In a brilliant feat of marketing, he named it Greenland to attract settlers, reasoning that people would want to go to a land with a good name. It worked. In 985, Eric led a fleet to establish 2 settlements on Greenland's southwestern coast. But this new home had a critical weakness. Greenland had almost no trees suitable for building or, more importantly, for repairing ocean-going ships. Their survival depended on imports from Europe and a desperate search for timber. Their eyes inevitably turned further west, towards the mysterious lands just over the horizon. According to the ancient saga of the Greenlanders, the first European to see North America was not the famous Leif Erikson, but a merchant captain named Bjarni Herjolfsson. Around the year 986, while trying to sail from Iceland to his father's new farm in Greenland, Bjarni's ship was blown off course by a storm. After days lost in the fog, he sighted a land that was wooded and had low hills. This didn't match the description of icy Greenland, so focused only on finding his father, he refused to go ashore and sailed north. Twice more he sighted new lands, one flat and forested, the other high and glaciated, but he never stopped. When he finally reached Greenland, his story of these new lands to the west spread like wildfire through the small community. Bjarni was criticized for his lack of curiosity, but he had planted a seed. The man to act on that seed was Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red. Described as a shrewd and ambitious man, Leif bought Bjarni's ship, hired a crew of 35, and around the year 1001, set out to retrace Bjarni's route in reverse. The first land they found was the last one Bjarni had seen. It was a desolate place of flat rocks and giant glaciers. Leif named it Helluland, or Flat Stone Land. This perfectly matches the description of Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic. Sailing south, they came to the second land, which was flat and forested with white sand beaches. For men from timber-starved Greenland, this was a treasure trove. Leif named it Markland, or Forest Land, which is almost certainly the coast of modern-day Labrador. Finally, after 2 more days at sea, they found it. The saga describes a place of unbelievable abundance. A river flowed from a lake into the sea, teeming with the largest salmon they had ever seen. The climate was so mild, they believed cattle could graze outside all winter. They built large houses for a winter camp, a place they called Leifsbudir, or Leif's Booths. The land got its famous name when Leif's German foster father, Tyrker, discovered wild vines and grapes, a fruit he knew from his childhood. Leif proudly named the new country Vinland. In the spring, they sailed back to Greenland, their ship loaded with timber and grapes, making Leif Erikson a wealthy and famous man. Leif's success inspired a series of follow-up voyages, each more dramatic than the last. First, his brother Thorvald led an expedition back to Leif's camp. While exploring the coast, they came across 3 skin-covered boats with 9 local men. In a brutal act of unprovoked violence, the Norse attacked and killed 8 of them. The one who escaped soon returned with a large force. In the ensuing battle, Thorvald was shot with an arrow, becoming the first European known to die and be buried in North America. This bloody first contact set a disastrous precedent. The most ambitious expedition was led by a wealthy Icelandic merchant, Thorfinn Karlsefni, who arrived with 3 ships, over 100 people, and livestock, fully intending to build a permanent colony. His wife, Gudrid, gave birth to a son, Snorri, the first European child born in the Americas. At first, things went well. They began a cautious trade with the local people, whom the Norse called Skrællingar, a dismissive term that might mean wretches. The Skrællingar traded valuable furs for red cloth and milk. But tensions mounted. The breaking point came when one of the Norse bulls broke loose and bellowed, terrifying the natives. They returned, ready for a fight. The Norse were overwhelmed by the attack, but the sagas tell a stunning story. Freydis, Eric the Red's daughter, who was pregnant at the time, saw the men retreating. Enraged, she grabbed a sword from a fallen warrior, pulled out one of her breasts, and slapped the flat of the blade against it, screaming a war cry. The sagas say the sight of this furious, pregnant woman so terrified the Skrællingar that they fled. Despite winning the battle, Karlsefni realized their position was hopeless. He concluded they would always live in fear of the people who already lived there. After 3 winters, the first European attempt to colonize the New World was abandoned. The final Vinland voyage in the sagas is a dark tale of greed, led by the same Freydis. She tricked 2 Icelandic brothers into a joint expedition, then had her husband and his men murder them and their entire crew in their sleep to steal their larger ship and all their cargo. This brutal massacre marked the end of the Vinland dream. Internal conflict and external threats had made it too dangerous to continue. For nearly 1,000 years, that's where the story ended, in the pages of these epic but unproven sagas. Then, in 1960, a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad, guided by the geographical clues in the sagas, was led by a local fisherman to a series of overgrown mounds in a tiny fishing village on the northernmost tip of Newfoundland, Canada. The village was called LAnseAuxMeadows. What Helge's wife, archaeologist Anne Steen Ingstad, unearthed there would rewrite history. They found the remains of 8 turf buildings, in a style identical to Norse farmsteads in Greenland and Iceland. There were 3 large longhouses, big enough to house up to 90 people. And then came the smoking gun. They discovered a smithy, a workshop for an ironworker, complete with a stone anvil and, crucially, over 100 pieces of slag, the waste product of forging iron. Ironworking was a technology completely unknown to the native peoples of North America. This was definitive proof of a European presence. They also found a bronze ringed pin for a cloak, a classic Viking design. Even more amazing was a small, stone spindle whorl, a tool used for spinning wool into yarn. In Norse society, spinning was exclusively women's work. Its discovery was near certain proof that women were at the site, just as the sagas claimed. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in 2021 with a groundbreaking scientific study. Scientists analyzed pieces of wood from the site that were clearly cut by metal axes. They were looking for the signature of a massive solar storm that hit Earth in the year 993, leaving a unique radiocarbon fingerprint in tree rings around the world. They found the 993 ring. Then they simply counted the rings outward to the edge where the tree was cut by a Norse axe. The number of rings was 28. 993 plus 28 equals 1021. For the first time ever, science had given us the exact year that Vikings were in North America, cutting down trees. The myth was now indisputable fact. So, if the Vikings got there first, why did it take another 500 years for the world to change? The Vinland colony failed for a few key reasons. First, as Karlsefni realized, they were hopelessly outnumbered. Their iron weapons gave them an edge, but the native peoples, defending their homeland, were too numerous and too resilient. Second, the distance was just too great. Vinland was an extension of the Greenland colony, which was itself a tiny, struggling outpost on the edge of the European world. Greenland simply didn't have the people or resources to support a transatlantic settlement. Finally, context is everything. Leif Erikson reported back to a small farming community. When Columbus returned in 1492, his news was spread across Europe by the printing press, igniting a fierce competition between powerful nations who were primed and ready for global expansion. The Norse discovery of America is a monumental achievement, a testament to their courage and skill. But its true significance may lie in its failure. It's a story of a dream that was found and then lost. It reminds us that history is not a straight line of progress, and that the New World was an old world, whose people successfully defended it from its first European invaders, a story that was forgotten by history, only to be rediscovered a millennium later. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know down in the comments below. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.